Hi, it's Laura Decomarini, Teen Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome. I am here with a VR to Imogen over at Sapling Tarot and their video on having a deck collection. I will link their video in the description box below. I will also list the 14 questions and do my best to timestamp. This is a tag that I wasn't sure if I was going to do initially because I feel like the list of questions is very interesting. And it's also the kind of list of questions where I feel like I might have too many things to say about some of them and very little to say about others. But maybe that's fine. Maybe that's fine. It just means the timestamps will be unevenly spaced. That's okay. So I've been enjoying the VRs, so I figured why not. The first question is, how long have you been collecting decks? I don't know the answer to this question. I feel like it's hard to say insofar as I never, like to this day, have had a moment where I thought to myself, I'm going to collect tarot decks. I was given my first deck as a young person in maybe 2002 or so. And I had that deck for years as my only tarot deck. I think I probably had some concept that there were other tarot decks out there, but you know, I had my deck, and my deck was the Jonathan D. Tarot pack, which I'm pretty sure that my mom and grandma picked because the backs were purple. I was like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's nice for a young person who likes purple. Why not? It's a kind of Smith-Waite Marseille mashup that would literally be the last thing I would suggest as a first deck for anyone. But it was my first deck, so I love it. Somewhere along the way, I got Smith-Waite, the one in the yellow box with the plaid backs, at some point. I'm not even sure what year I would have acquired that. And I know that I first kind of came across and ended up buying my first indie deck in 2016. So that would have been, I guess, my third deck. And at the time, I was interested in, you know, what it would be like to have a deck with more kind of modern imagery that maybe felt more relatable or, like, frankly, more interesting to me. And I was also curious about pips at the time. I was curious about kind of starting to learn, oh, there's kind of different styles of decks and things like that. And I wonder what it would be like to kind of try reading with this other kind of deck. I wasn't thinking about constructing a collection, right? So I wasn't actively thinking of myself as collecting decks per se. And I don't really think of myself that way now, though saying that I have a deck collection feels fairly accurate. When I was a kid, like very young child, I had a coin collection. And the reason that I had a coin collection that I was very proud of, you know, was because my grandfather would travel for work. And when he did, he would, you know, as like a souvenir, give us his leftover pocket change. And I thought this was just completely fascinating. And so I had, you know, the binder with the little plastic squares that you put the different ones in, and, you know, I would show it off and, like, look at how many there are here. And that to me, I was very actively engaged in collecting a thing. And it was a thing that I enjoyed doing with my grandfather, and he humored me, you know, which I appreciate. And I've never approached decks in that way. So trying to pinpoint how long I've been collecting decks, as straightforward as a question as it seems, is actually kind of fraught or complicated. I don't have a good answer. Question number 2, what kind of collection do you have? For example, minimalist, utilitarian, historical, and so on, are some examples that were provided as types that you could say. I would say that I have a kind of collection that is assorted. I don't have a single specific aesthetic. I like a lot of different kind of art styles. I like different types of decks. I like different themes. It's a collection that I feel like if someone knows me, or like maybe knows a fair amount about me, even not necessarily knowing me personally, but like, you know, kind of knows me a little bit, that my collection would make sense. But if someone didn't know me at all, you didn't know me at all, and you just kind of saw this array of decks and it was like, look at this collection, I feel like it would be like, what is this? None of these things go together in any obvious way, in terms of kind of a visual style or anything like that. I feel like they all, I don't know if I'd say they would all represent parts of me necessarily, but they're all connected in some way, either to kind of, you know, an interest or an aspect of my identity or something that I appreciate artistically. Like there's a reason for everything, but those reasons are not all the same. And so it's a very eclectic assortment, we'll say. Question number 3 is, are you a completionist? Which I understand to mean, like, if there's decks that come in a series, do you want to have all of them for the sake of having the full series? And I think I'm going to say no. I don't own, to my knowledge, very many decks that are part of any kind of series. Like I don't have any of the Seasons of the Witch, like these ones that are kind of known as part of a collection. I did just get My Friend Fire by Mari in the Sky, which I know is intended to be part of a collection of decks, one for each element. Will I feel compelled in some way to get all of those just because I have the first one? No, not really. But since I got My Friend Fire, I've been really, really enjoying it. And I really like the Gentle Tarot as well. So based on that, you know, whatever Mari's next project is, having previously enjoyed her decks, like, will I look at it and perhaps be more likely to get it than I would, you know, some other random deck that I have no prior familiarity with the artist? Maybe. But I wouldn't say that I'm a completionist for that reason. I would say, though, that kind of prior positive experiences with or love for a particular deck, say by a particular creator, will definitely maybe make me more likely to look at the next thing that creator is doing. Like loving the Endless Oracle, I knew that I would want to have the Endless Tarot, for instance. But if he was to come out with an Endless Kipper or something, I would not feel like I needed to get that for the sake of completing a collection, because I don't know how to read decks like that. So I would say no. It's a long-winded way of saying no. Question number 4, how do you store or organize your collection? I've shown pictures of this before. My tarot decks are on a wooden wall shelf that is mounted, that is mounted to my wall. My dad built the shelf. And my other decks, like Oracle, Lenormand, as well as other divinatory tools that are not decks, so things like dominoes and like the journey tokens and the geomancy coins and those kinds of things, are all on a silver kind of narrow shelf. It's metal that sits on the ground, that when I bought it was labeled as a boot rack, but it is a really good size for decks. So that is where they're stored. They're not especially organized. They're not like alphabetical or something. My bookshelf is. But I would say that they're loosely grouped in terms of on the silver, the Oracle shelf. The top shelf is the smallest, and then the shelves get bigger as you go down. On the small one at the top, I have all of the kind of different kinds of things. I have my OM staves and my dominoes and things like that. And then I kind of have all of my animal Oracle decks kind of on one side of one shelf, and all of my playing cards kind of together, but it's not particularly organized beyond that. It's very loose, I would say. Question number 5. What is your favorite thing about your collection? I love having a array of types of artwork at my fingertips that I can just look at and appreciate at any time. I also love having the ability to kind of like do the equivalent of like mood reading. Like, you know, I can kind of follow my sensibilities on any given day, whether that's kind of looking for something that feels seasonal or looking for something that has a particular kind of like vibe to it, or something that feels particularly suited to the question that I want to ask, you know, or a study that I want to do or something like this, and that I feel like I have something that will fit what I'm looking for. Question number 6 is, what is your least favorite thing or something to improve about your collection? I don't think I have a least favorite thing. From an organizational standpoint, maybe my least favorite thing is that I always feel like I have to keep the boxes for things, because if I'm ever going to maybe give something away later, I want to have all the stuff that came with it. And some decks come in really large, unwieldy boxes that are not how I want to store them. They're not how I want to carry them around with me, but I feel like I have to keep the box just in case somebody will want it. So I do have another storage cupboard that's I have kind of an altar space that has just some different items, my druid belt, some cards displaying kind of some current astrology, some different things. It's an altar space, but the surface that it's on is the top of an old wooden cabinet that used to be like a wooden cabinet that would have a television inside, like a big old square television inside. And inside of there's shelves now, and I keep all the boxes of the decks in there. So my least favorite is storing the boxes, but I, for some reason, cannot make myself not store the boxes. It just feels like a thing I should do. So that's a least favorite. But that's not really about my collection. That is about my storage habits. That is my least favorite thing. Question number 7, what is the biggest category in your collection? I feel like people have defined this in slightly different ways. The biggest category in my deck collection is tarot, for sure, in that I have substantively more tarot decks than I do, say, Oracle or playing cards or Lenormand or any of these other kinds of systems. Definitely tarot. I don't know whether I could say at this point if I have the most kind of Smith-Waite inflected versus pips. I feel like I have a fair number of decks and tend to gravitate towards decks that kind of blur some of those lines. So it's hard for me to say, oh yeah, the biggest category is kind of Smith-Waite, because I don't actually think it is. I'm not sure. Thematically, maybe nature decks, like overall, if I was going to try to pick a theme, would be a big one in my collection because of, you know, animal oracles, plants, trees, you know, kind of outdoor related decks. That would be a big category as well. Question number 8, what is the smallest category in your collection? Lenormand. I have not spent as much time learning Lenormand as I have a number of other systems. I'm interested in it. I've read a little bit here and there, but I don't have very many Lenormand decks at all. Question number 9, do you have a holy grail in your collection? I feel like this is another one where people are kind of taking their answers in different directions. I would say yes, if the way that I would explain that is that there are some decks in my collection that I never really thought that I would get a chance to have or get a chance to work with because they were out of print, but that I've been able to, you know, somehow add to my collection. I stumbled upon a copy of Tarot of the Silicon Dawn in its box in the plastic wrap way after that deck went out of print. And I found it in a store and it was not prohibitively costly. I had no idea it was there. It's a store that I like to frequent. When I'm in the area where that store is, I like to pop in and have a look. And sometimes they have different out-of-print decks. It's not the bulk of what they do, but sometimes they have some there, and they just happen to have that one there. And I felt like this deck was just waiting for me there. And so that felt like a kind of holy grail moment, I suppose. That's what comes to mind first. Question number 10. Do you ever wish your collection was bigger or smaller, or is it complete? I would say no, no, and no. If I wanted it to be bigger, I would be shopping right now. If I wanted it to be smaller, I would be doing something to make that happen. And I'm not going to say it's complete because I know that there are decks in the works, by creators whose work I really like, that there's a very good chance that when those decks release, I will be interested in picking them up. So I don't wish it was bigger or smaller, nor do I wish that it was complete. I feel very content. Question number 11. How often do you declutter your collection? And I'm going to say, Imogen said this as well. I don't think of decks as clutter. Like, I won't use that language. Clutter to me is like the drawer in the kitchen that has, pens that may or may not work, and elastic bands, and sets of like wooden chopsticks from takeouts that you didn't end up using. Like, that's clutter. I don't think about tarot decks or oracle decks, as clutter. And I don't engage in decluttering. I definitely rehome things here and there. I do have a little bag of decks set aside because I think that some folks in my workplace and I might do a bit of a kind of tarot day deck swap, show your decks to each other and do readings kind of either, at someone's house or something like that. So I do, have that plan. When I read and when I do kind of public events, I have been reading at a market a couple of times a year, like kind of seasonally. I will often have a couple of decks that I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'll rehome these, and so maybe I'll put them on my table, and someone might buy one, for example. But I do not ever do any kind of concerted, deliberate shrinking of my collection. It's very kind of one-off. Oh, somebody might really like this, or this person might really like this. Yeah. Never is the answer. I never declutter. Question number 12. Do you ever get envious of seeing other people's collections? No. No, my collection is me, I think. I enjoy seeing, decks that other people really enjoy, and I like hearing people talk about their experiences with decks that they really enjoy and why they really enjoy them, and great readings that they've had with them, or different kind of deck studies that they're doing. Even if I have zero interest in the deck itself for myself, I just like experiencing other people's enthusiasm in that way. Of course there's decks that I feel like I'll probably never own because they're out of print, that I'm like, oh, like it would be really nice to try that deck, or I think I would really love that, but not envious in like a bad way. Just that's amazing, that's amazing for that person. And I think that, yeah, if I could pick anyone's collection to be my collection, it would be mine, right? That's the one that reflects me. Question number 13, who on YouTube has the best collection videos? I don't know. I don't watch a lot of collection videos, to be honest. And I've definitely watched some, but none jump out in my mind as like, this is the best collection video ever. So I'm not sure. Question number 14, what is some advice you would give to a future or new deck collector? I've been very curious to see what other people say for this question. and people have said all kinds of things. The first thing that came to mind when I read this question, though, and so this is the advice that I would give, is prices on eBay that seem too good to be true probably are. There are a lot of counterfeit, and otherwise illegitimate decks out there. If you are interested in, being a new deck collector, like this is a thing that you want to do, my advice would be to kind of familiarize yourself with those kinds of issues, because if you're curating a collection, to me, those are really vital things to know, that I would want to know if I was just entering into kind of the tarot sphere at this point in my life. This is something that I would very much want to know and know how to avoid. So I'm not going to kind of get into all of that here. There are folks who have made videos about, and different posts about how to identify and avoid counterfeit decks and things like that. But I would say my advice would be definitely, watch out for that, because unfortunately, it's increasingly a thing that pops up, including on, I feel like on websites where it might have once been much less likely to see that. It is definitely really proliferating, and there's a lot of kind of, labor issues and things like that around those decks. So I would just familiarize yourself with that. Which is a weird note to end this video on, but that is, that's it. That's my thoughts on having a deck collection. Thank you, Imogen, for sharing the prompts. Thank you for watching, if you stuck with me to the end especially. I will see you again soon. Let me know if you would like to share anything about your collection in the comments below. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon.